This is the Ron Paul Liberty Report with Ron Paul, Daniel McAdams, and Chris Rossini.
We are all ambassadors of the Ron Paul doctrine, and it's so simple. Just tell the truth.
An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army or any
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Chris Rossini as our co-host. Chris, welcome to the program. I understand in a little while we'll be talking about affordability. But first, Chris, welcome to the program.
It is great to be with you, Dr. Paul. And I'll start off. Our Friday viewers know that we have a partnership with Birch Gold. And our Friday viewers know, I'm sure, that our money is constantly losing value. Why is that? Well, it's because the government counterfeits. And you may think to yourself, well, isn't counterfeiting illegal? And yes, it is. We can't counterfeit. I can't. You can't. Even the government can't constitutionally. But they found a little workaround. They created the Federal Reserve and made it legal for them to counterfeit money. Similar to how the government doesn't censor us. Oh, they would never dare censor, but they'll make the social media censor us. That's how they get around the laws. And this has been going on for over 100 years, and our money is just constantly losing value, and the prices keep skyrocketing because they print money for whatever they want. If they want a war, they'll print the money. If they want more welfare, print the money. Bail out corporations, print the money. And we pay for it with higher prices and a lower standard of living constantly. So that's our system, and until it changes, that's what we have to deal with. Fortunately, there are ways to deal with it. You can protect yourself by buying gold, and that's why we have this partnership with Birch Gold Group to get you started if you're interested in even just learning about it and what do you do, how do you do it. They can contact you if you text Ron to 989898. Somebody will respond to you, get you some material to look over, to learn about. You're not required to become their customer, but of course, if you want to, that's what they're there for. So again, if you're interested in learning about gold, protecting yourself from our constantly depreciating money, text Ron to 989898. Back to you, Dr. Paul.
They're very good. You know, today I mentioned in the opening that we would be talking about affordability. I'm sort of fascinated with this subject at the present time because it's being used constantly in the presidential campaign and other campaigns going on, because it's dawning on a lot of people, and the politicians and the people are outraged by what's going on. And Chris just mentioned that prices go up for a good reason, but it's going on, but it's interpreted totally different. It's misleading. Because the statement, and both parties do it, but I think the Democrats demagogue it a little bit more than Republicans, because they go up and they say, well, I can't afford my gasoline anymore. I can't afford to pay my electric bill. I can't afford to do this. And everything is they can't afford it. And so many groups then say, well, we need a bailout. I heard on the radio this morning, I think it was airlines or another group of people that were having trouble with these prices going up. So there are consequences, and isn't to say, well, how did this happen? What is the cause? Don't we have to remove the cause? No, they want to bail out, and they're very blunt about it, and they'll probably get it because on the short run, it's like sort of a drug addict. He finally wants to have treatment, but he says, but right now I can't stand it. Just give me one more shot, and that's going to help me get off the addiction of the drugs. And well, this drug is this printing of money, and it makes people feel better. It's the only thing they have to offer because they don't ask the right question. They don't ask the question, why are things not affordable anymore? And but if you just pay attention to what's going on in the media, you'll recognize that they say it all the time, implying that it's some type of policy, it's somebody's fault that's doing this. But I don't think they ever even come close to trying to explain, why things aren't affordable. And if people don't understand this, it's going to be very hard to correct it, because you can't try to treat a drug addict very easily by not explaining to them. And they say drug addicts can't get off their habit until they make a major decision that they're going to, have a rough time getting off it, but they will have to do it, because the addiction to this monetization of their debt is so ingrained. People think it's natural. So, and they're very successful in getting bailouts, but they don't ask, well, how did it all get started? How did the system get addicted? Well, there are some major causes of this, because people changed the philosophy of what was intended by the Constitution. And we have a system of economics called interventionism. And interventionism is a softer term for corporatism and fascism, where the government is really a partner with these businesses, and it's getting worse by the day, and yet it isn't working. And the thing of it is, we have to stop and get things, because so much that we can't afford. We're not talking about. We can't afford any more wars. We can't afford the war going on in Iran. And we can't afford, the fact that it is our policy and we're losing a lot of prestige in the world. And we can't afford to do this because it's going to ruin the dollar. The dollar's going down, the prices are going up, and people are struggling to compensate for that. And Chris made the pitch for why, if you haven't looked at gold seriously, you should do this. You look and find out how to compensate for that. But you have to find out why, because it's easy to sell, the issue of why people accept the policies that we have now. The one thing is there's two systems that are built into what we're doing, why the people tolerate. One is called democracy. The founders didn't like the term. They didn't like what was implied by democracy. It's not in the Constitution. And they wanted a republic, not where the majority can be the dictator. And you say, well, the people, there's not, how do you measure and get 51% of the people agreeing to all this nonsense? Well, there's a gimmick to it. You get a lot of special interest groups, and they band together, and they all say, I want this from the government, this from the government, and this from the government. And they get together and they build up more than 51%. It's more. And it's bipartisan. And they get together and they get these programs. And, Republicans, so many of them talked against the war. Even our president talked against the war. We should stop all the wars and we shouldn't start any new ones. But as soon as they get in office, they change their mind because of the pressure of the deep state, because they're the financiers of the people running for Congress, the people in Congress. So they then bend over and end up doing that and voting for it. When there was a vote just recently, for curtailing, what we're doing in Iran, it was overwhelmingly in favor of this. It's changing a little bit with these votes, but it shouldn't even exist. We shouldn't curtail, and we can't afford to avoid the Constitution, which says we're not supposed to be in any war unless we declare the war, know why it's on, know what the problem is, and know what we have to do to stop the war. So we can't afford bad policy. If that is what has to be understood, because you just can't add on bad policy because it might make you feel good for a week or two, and there will be people benefiting. There's all kinds of things going on, and there'll be a lot of lying and innuendos about what the government's doing for us, and yet they're pouring poison into the system by bailing out, by printing all this money, and the distortions continue. Ultimately, the powers and the efforts of the free market continue to work, and they will. The market prevents this from happening because it's a daydream, thinking that we can live forever on our wealth. And we've had tremendous wealth in this country. You know, the natural resources, the control of the financial system, the control of the reserve currency. We've had that. And yet we've had squandered a lot of that already. And along with this, the big thing that we can't afford anymore is the loss of personal liberty. Chris?
That's right, Dr. Paul. And President Trump's decision to do this Iran war was, very bad decision. And not only because he didn't succeed, but because he can't admit that he didn't succeed, and he's got to now drag it out looking for some kind of magical solution. And he's paying for it. The polls are as bad as they get. I'm seeing over and over every day that they're worse than American history. And, if you listen to the president, you're going to be the last one to know that. But even Fox News is showing polls that 70% of Americans believe the economy is getting worse. And we're heading into the summer months now. I am not looking forward to getting my electricity bills in the next 3 months. But on top of it, I'm paying almost $5, $4.50 for gas, which is sky high. And, the president I don't know what he's thinking, but he's being stubborn and denying all of this. He says even if oil prices double from here to $200 a barrel, that it would still be worth it. If double from here. And yesterday he says gas prices are way down. So I don't know who he's trying to appeal to when he is saying these things. Is it somebody who doesn't buy gas or doesn't pass a gas station? I mean, who is going to buy that? I don't know, but he says it, and it's I don't know what kind of strategy that is, but it's a consequence of throwing away, taking care of America, and now it's all war all the time, and the costs are just racking up. We are bearing the brunt of the costs.
When they come up with these stories that we can't afford it and trying to narrow it down just to a political argument between the two parties and saying, well, it's their fault, they did this and that. And yet it is part of this system because, the saying now is I can't afford to fill my car up with my gasoline. And, the real thing is we also can't afford the debt that keeps building because everybody wants this bailout and the money, and these debts are just horrendous. And how does it work if they have run up debt? Well, how does it hurt the people? Well, we can't tolerate anymore. We can't afford any more Federal Reserve interference. And you know what that means? That means that just a token effort to recognize that would be an audit of the Fed. What are they really doing to our money and who's benefiting? Because it is a true statement that the progressive left are making. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So it isn't like conservatives are on one side and liberals on the other. It's bipartisan, and the big issues are that it's very bipartisan for the wars that we get into, even though they're not declared, and it's very bipartisan when they come up and vote for these issues, and it's in a way support the principles and the policies that we have. So this doesn't recognize some of the basics that are important too. It's philosophic as well because for more than 100 years, you got our government schools. They didn't teach about the gold standard. They didn't teach about, self-ownership and self-reliance. They just inch by inch, they moved in the direction of the government was in charge, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's the reason people are so upset is there's no clear, answer out there. Yes, they keep asking for the money, but a lot more are getting worried. How does this end? And it doesn't end well if we continue to do it. in taking care of the drug addict dies. And right now, our system is is at dead ends. It's going to end, and it's what's going to be replaced it. Well, the Marxists right now are just itching at it. They're actually winning elections in this country, not in secret, being secret authoritarians and socialists and communists. They're out in the open and talking about it. So it is a big move, and it's a philosophic issue, and it's one of having individuals with integrity that will live up to what they say instead of arguing one thing, get in office and do the rest, and they succumb to the deep state, and the process continues. But we have to do everything we can to prepare for this. And one of the things we talk a lot about is already things that Chris has mentioned, that financially, and it isn't like we don't have any liberty. Fortunately, there's a fair amount of liberty that we have. At least we can have our program. But overall, we can't afford to pay for it, and that's why it'll come to an end.
That's right, Dr. Paul. And you make a great point about, socialists and Marxists, just strolling in. And President Trump is just rolling out the red carpet for them because of his policies. It's just going to be overwhelming against that. They're just going to stroll in. And, we have to remember, what was said when this started, unconditional surrender he wanted. He was going to personally pick the next leader of Iran. And none of this happened. Khomeini was replaced with his son, Khomeini. There's no uprising. There's no, they didn't get uranium. The nuclear program's intact. The strait is closed. It was fine before they sneak attacked. And the world economy, including us, especially us, were suffering because of this. So nothing was accomplished. But as Dr. Paul and Daniel pointed out yesterday, it's costing us already $70 billion. We, the American people, are taking the brunt of $70 billion. We didn't have that, to give to this, to just waste away into smoke. So once again, in another Middle East war, we're bearing all the costs, and it's not even for us. The president said it was, he did this for Israel. The State Department on their website, this was for our Israeli allies. So it's not even for us, and we are absorbing tremendous costs. Is it any wonder that the left will just stroll in on a red carpet after this kind of disaster?
And our president argues the opposite of saying that if we don't do it and run up these debts, then we won't be able to achieve our goals in foreign policy. And, that is nonsense. How many times have they said we're mainly in Iran, not for oil and not because it's part of our empire and what their real reasons are. They say that we're there to make sure that they don't have a nuclear weapon. Well, there has been, some serious discussion and positions that Trump has canceled, where we were moving in that direction, where the Iranians were cooperating with that. And I truly believe that they're in a position where they're doing it out of defense, not offense. They're not. How many times have you read a story where, the Iranian army just invaded their neighbors or something like that? Well, we go 6,000 miles away to do this and start these wars. So it makes no sense whatsoever for us to have a foreign policy of aggression like this, and then we put these countries in a position where, yes, the only thing that anybody listens to and they leave you alone is that if you have a nuclear weapon. So out of their own defense, you can understand it. Does that make them the good guys or the bad guys? No, they have a lot of problems. But I think in our case, it's so glaringly, a responsibility of the United States to quit building on the empire. Empires always end, and I think that's what we're seeing right now is the cracking of the empire, and we see that through the challenge to our currency as well as the failures. I just don't think there's what you hear every night on TV of these fantastic successes. We just had negotiations, and this war is going to last for 5 days and it'll be over. Oh, I'm at 5 weeks. Oh, I'm at 5 months. And it goes on and on. And some of these wars, just think of the wars that I've had to deal with, in Congress and elsewhere. It was the Iraq War. That was over 10 years. And then Afghanistan. We tried to stop that. And that was 30 years that we're involved. It just goes on and on. That is what we can't afford. We can't afford bad, stupid policy any longer. We need to decide what freedom is all about because it's so wonderful. It's so creative for peace and prosperity. Chris?
Excellent, Dr. Paul. I'll finish up with my closing thoughts. Yeah, you mentioned those wars, and it's a sad fact that the government, the U.S. government, Trump especially, they do not like to admit when they are wrong and when they have failed. And those wars are an example. They always double down, triple down, quadruple down. COVID was another perfect example of that mentality. They made all these dumb rules. Take this jab, this is going to work, and then it didn't work. Well, take a second one, and a third, a fourth, fifth. I think they went up to 8 of them, until the American people were so sick of it that they were just defying the rules and everything else, and the whole thing fell apart. That's how government works. They will not say, we were wrong, sorry, we're going to walk away. They always have to make things worse. But, ultimately, that's why the sooner the American people wake up, the better, because they do care about public opinion. But they are so skilled with the TV and the president, he goes out and, like I said, he'll say the gas prices are down. They're so skilled at manipulating just enough people to just keep it going another day that, it drags on, and it's a shame. But we have to do our best to survive it and to thrive as best as we can by speaking the truth to others.
Very good. The solution and the understanding of what liberty is all about, I don't think it's complex. And I think if we could simplify it, I found in my travels and my campaigning that young people are very open to it. When you talk about, self-ownership, you can do what you want. It's your money. You don't have income tax. You're never going to be drafted. This sort of thing. They agree with this. And yet they also accepted when it's understood. But, there's one drawback for you. If you have your liberty, you're responsible for this. You just can't do it and do whatever, and you hurt people. You can't hurt people and get away with this. But the other people can't hurt you, should not hurt you. But the government shouldn't hurt you either. If you have a set of rules that are reasonable and have been around for a long time and they're itemized really in natural law, if you go with that, you're not allowed to lie, cheat, steal, or kill, and murder people. That's prohibited. But here we have a system where the government does that. It's assassinations. Governments are, involved so often in this. But it's the government that manipulates the financial system. It's the government that manages the destruction of our currency, and all these wars that we fight. So it's the government that's at fault. But in natural law, which is not a written law by governments, that's called positive law, and yet it's the least thing that it was positive. But the government laws are in competition with natural law. Natural law has been known from beginning of time, even before they had printing presses. But it was known, and that's how civilization got started. That it was sort of ingrained in the system. People knew early on that you weren't supposed to lie. You had to have it. And I'm sure it started by family here and a group of family. Follow this. Yes, this is a good rule. Don't lie to me. Lie, cheating, stealing, counterfeiting, all these things were natural and normal. And so therefore, that meant that governments had to follow the rules that they assume the people want to do. But that isn't the case now, because the government owns us, and they own us until they get rid of the draft, the possibility of draft and the registration and the fallback for coercing people into the military, dying in large number, because I do remember friends and teachers and relatives dying in World War II and Korea and all the way up. They say, oh, well, nobody's being drafted right now. Yeah, but they always keep it there. They advance. They're now making it automatically to be drafted. So that means the government really ultimately owns us, and they'll decide for what reason it should be used, the military. And they don't even ask the people to say, is this a good idea to go to war? No, they don't do that. They prohibit that. But the other way I think that they make slaves of us is that everything we earn is assumed to belong to the government. And they said, no, that's not. Some poor people, they don't even have to pay income tax, but they pay it through the bad system. They pay it by printing, the government printing money and tax or products going up that bread and butter costs more and gasoline costs more. So that is a debt. So they do that to run their system. But the income tax, if you make $10,000 this year, and the government comes and says, oh, okay, let me see. We want 20%. Okay, these are just numbers that are fictitious, of course. And, if it's $8,000, they say they'll tell you what you can keep. You might be able to keep 20%, 30%. It's been up and down forever. And that's the iron fist of government saying these are the rules. We own you, and it's who runs the government. And that's why a lot of people go to government. They see what is behind it. That isn't true of a lot of them, because the majority of the members of Congress I knew went there with good intentions. But good intentions are not enough if you can't understand the philosophic principles and the moral principles behind a free society. I want to thank everybody today for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Thanks for watching the Ron Paul Liberty Report. Like and subscribe to help spread the message. And until next time, live free.
This country